Even if your job is that of a hangman, you can still do it compassionately. Out of anger, he just looked at the bird like this. The bird just caught fire and burnt up, turned into ashes. What is there for me to learn from a butcher? I'm a Brahmin. Let me tell you. There was a sage who's very famous in India, ancient sage called Kaushik. When Kaushik was yet to become famous, a young sannyasi, he had a dip in the river and sat under a tree for his morning practice. With a slightly upturned face, he sat. A bird was in the tree. It does its things. So, it's not its fault, there is gravity. And it came and landed straight on his face. An upturned face, you know. It's a dangerous way to sit under a tree. So he got so furious. Just now he had a dip in the river and he's trying to meditate, and this bird splashed in his face. Out of anger, he just looked at the bird like this. The bird just caught fire and burnt up, turned into ashes. So he felt really nice, okay, this is good, working. Then he finished his practice and everything, and for the day's meal, because people on the spiritual path are not supposed to earn their living, they are supposed to beg and eat, so he went. So he went to the town, stood in front of a house and said, "Bhikshan dehi," that means, "I've come for alms." Generally in the tradition, if a person who's on the spiritual path comes and asks for food, even if your children are not eaten, first thing is give it to him, because he doesn't own anything, he doesn't have anything and he's on a higher pursuit, so he must be fed. That is the culture. So he said, "Bhikshan dehi." From inside, a lady's voice said, "I'm coming, please wait." He raised his voice and said, "Bhikshan dehi." So just this today morning, the bird, you know, it's given him a little kind of oomph to his spiritual process. She said, "Please wait, I'm coming." He raised his voice further, "Bhikshan dehi," he shouted. She said, "Wait for a few minutes, I'm coming." But he went on shouting. Then the lady came. And he yelled, "How dare you keep me waiting like this? I'm a sannyasi, how can you keep me waiting like this?" And he glared at her. She said, "Don't you glare at me, I'm not a little bird." So then because it happened only today morning, it's not been in the newspapers. And those days nobody could tweet except the birds, and the bird is dead. So he said, "How do you know?" He said, "It doesn't matter, don't glare at me. I was serving my husband who is blind of vision. I was feeding him, so I asked you to wait. What is the big hurry for you? I said, I will come." He said, "But how do you know?" She said, "Doesn't matter. It's in your kind of mode, the way you are right now, you cannot know all this." Then he begged her, "Please take me as your disciple, I want to learn from you." She said, "I'm a housewife, I don't take disciples. You can go to my guru if you want. I'll give you the address." So she gave the address. She told him where to go. Then he followed the instructions and went. It went into the marketplace and deeper into the marketplace, and then went into the butcher's lane. He's a Brahmin. To be even seen in the butcher's lane is a crime. He looked all over, meat hanging. He just thought maybe it's a mistake, but it's the correct address. He inquired, people pointed in this direction and he went. Then he asked around, people said, okay, this is the man there. And he's all blood splattered and cutting meat. He thought, for sure there must be a mistake. This is not it. Even if it's true, I'm not willing to learn from a butcher. What is there for me to learn from a butcher? I'm a Brahmin. He was about to turn away. The butcher said, he called him by the name and he said, come, I know she sent you. Now he went and stood there. This whole blood and gore, he couldn't stand it, but he just stood there amazed. Now he went there, that woman knew about the bird, he comes here, this guy already knows about this woman sending. He waited. The butcher said, wait, I'll just finish this work and I'll come and see you. He just stood there. Then he finished his work, closed it, and then he walked. He walked 3 feet away from him, because walking next to a butcher who's actually… he's seen him chopping. Then the butcher talking to him, he said, just come, let me take you home, we will talk there. He went with him. He made him sit down and went inside. Showered, changed, came and he said, just give me some time. I have sick parents, I need to serve them, I need to take care of them first. So he went in and took care of these old parents and then came back and sat down. Then he asked, I want to know how to know this, what you know. Morning, that lady knew about the bird. Before I come, you know about me. How is this? I want to know this. He said, just learn to take care of something with absolute involvement. Something, it doesn't matter what. She takes care of her blind husband, I take care of my old parents. And when I chop these animals, I chop it with minimizing their suffering to whatever. I have chosen to be a butcher because if somebody else becomes a butcher, he may hurt the animals. I have become a butcher because I thought I could do it best. If I leave it to somebody else, they may do it somehow. So, not very different. Criminal lawyer do it compassionately, what's the problem? You may do lawyer's work, you may do some other work, it doesn't matter. All kinds of things need to be done in the world, you have to do it. But essentially if you see that I'm just life, life will reverberate with everything else. Love is not a policy, it's an experience. You're trying to make it a policy. As a policy, it's quite a stupid policy, really. If you look around and feel one with everything, it's a great feeling. You telling yourself, I am you, you are me, I am you. It leads to a completely different rubbish. Don't like anybody, don't dislike anybody, just be with them. As you can be with the trees and the clouds and the mountains and everything else. Suppose you say, I love your children, love my children, what do? You do whatever is needed. Yes or no? Isn't that what love is about? You do only what's needed, you're not prejudiced. So prejudice happens because you identified with something or the other. When I say prejudice, you need to understand, the moment the mind gets identified with something, you have a certain kind of prejudice. If you say, I'm a man, you have a very male kind of prejudice, which is, you won't know. Others think you're something else, you know. They have bad names. Others. At the moment you say, I'm Indian, you have an Indian kind of prejudice. Whatever identity you take, your mind works only around that and it makes it look like it's all right, that particular thing, whatever you identified with, everything else looks different. So essentially spiritual process means not identifying with something new, learning to live here without any sense of identity, learning to live here just as life, because that's what you really are, isn't it? So right now, you're in the court, it is not the nature of your job, it is your identity which doesn't allow you to reverberate. Right now, you may be working towards getting a death sentence for somebody, okay? Even if you're working to get a death sentence, you can do this job well without being against the man. So it doesn't matter what is the nature of your job, even if your job is that of a hangman, you can still do it compassionately. People have done even such extreme jobs compassionately, isn't it?
Tibet as a culture, Tibet as a spiritual process. Some of the all-time greats in this culture have been a combination of spiritual process and occult. I think in the Tibetan culture, Milarepa stands out. So when Milarepa was young, he lost his father. His father had good lands and property and house, but once his father died, his uncle took over and made his young mother and his younger sister and him like slaves in the house and abused them and tortured them in many ways and took over the whole property. So he grew up with great sense of resentment and anger within himself. And when he became a youth, an adolescent, he left the family and went away. He left his younger sister and mother and went away. And he wanted to take revenge on his uncle and aunt who had showered an unspeakable amount of humiliation and torture upon these people. So he went to learn occult, and he mastered certain occult processes. And when he came back, after many years, both his mother and younger sister were dead. So he became even more angry. And he waited for an opportune moment when the uncle's son's wedding is to happen, and his uncle invited all his friends. And that day, he used his occult power and brought large hail falling on the house. And they say more than 85 people were killed because of this hail, including his uncle and aunt. The whole place was heaped with hail. And he felt very happy and justified for what he had done. But after some time, this started bothering him. If any human being is sensitive, the moment he misuses something, it'll bother him from within. You have to be in a certain level of grossness to continue that process, otherwise you cannot. Because the very nature of how this life is made, if there is a misuse at a very fundamental level, it is not conscience. I'm not talking about social conscience, I'm not talking about morality. Something much deeper will get disturbed. So similarly, for Milarepa, having done this, something deep inside him got disturbed. So he decided that he has to absolve himself of all this. He thought he has misused life in a very fundamental way. Whatever the justification, he has misused the fundamental process of life, so he wanted to seek the spiritual process. He wanted something with which in this life he will be freed. So he went in search of masters and he went to many people, and all of them were sincere enough to admit that they did not know how to attain realization in this life. They said, we can teach you something which will evolve you. Practice compassion, practice kindness, practice love, slowly you will evolve from lifetime to lifetime. He was not satisfied with those things, and still a certain level of anger was still burning within him. A certain regret, certain resentment, certain mixture of anger, a whole cocktail was going within him. So someone at last told him that the only person who could help you this way would be Marpa. So he went in search of him. When he approached the town in which Marpa lived, he met a bunch of children and he asked them. Marpa was known as the translator because he was titled as a translator because he was the one who translated all the great tantric Indian texts into Tibetan language. So he was always known and revered as the translator because he brought that knowledge here. His credentials were 3 times he had traveled to India and met certain masters and gotten teachings from them, methods from them, and the texts from them, and he had translated that to local languages. So when he asked, where is Marpa the translator, one child said, I know where he is, and he took him to the field where Marpa was ploughing the field. So when he took him there, Marpa looked at him and left the plough in the field and gave him a gourd of beer, locally brewed beer. Said, drink this and then plough the land. So Milarepa drank that and ploughed. Marpa left and a child stood there. After he completed the ploughing, he didn't know what to do. He stood there. Then the child came and said, it's time for you to come. The child took him home and then he realized this child was Marpa's own son. Then Marpa put him through all kinds of physical activity. Milarepa bowed down to him and asked him, I want Dhamma from you. That kind of Dhamma. Dhamma means a method or a process which will make me realize and become liberated in this life. I don't want to go to the next one. And also, please be kind enough to give me food and shelter. So Marpa said, you choose. If you want, I'll give you food and shelter. Choose Dhamma elsewhere. Look for Dhamma elsewhere. Or I'll give you Dhamma, you get your food and shelter somewhere else. This is the choice. So Milarepa said, okay, I want your Dhamma, I'll get my own food and shelter. So he went out begging. This is a very spirited man, whatever he does, he little overdoes. So he went out begging and he went far. And he gathered sacks of wheat. He's gathering enough for the whole year so that he can sit here and learn his Dhamma. So he collected a lot, then he sold some of the wheat and bought a copper pot with 4 handles on the side, that's a traditional kind of vessel, to cook his own food. Then this heavy load, very heavy load he carried and walked a long distance back, came into Marpa's house and dropped it with one big boom. Marpa was having his lunch. Halfway through the lunch, he left his lunch, came out and said, it looks like you're very angry. Just now, with your wheat and this vessel, you shook the whole house. It looks like you're out to destroy this house also as you destroyed your uncle's house. Just leave. Enough. Then Milarepa begged, please, you asked me to get my food, I got it. It was too heavy, I dropped it. So Marpa said, nothing doing, you're out. Because you didn't keep the sack right. You threw it down. You're not fit. So you stay out, do chores, plow my field, clean my house, do whatever. For years he did this. So periodically other students came and they were initiated into many things, but Milarepa got not a single initiation, not a single teaching. He did all the hard work. More than 8 years he worked without a single teaching or initiation. Everybody else were coming for a day, they were getting initiated and they're going, but he waited and waited and waited, doing all kinds of hard work. Then one day he came and sneaked in and sat in a satsang like this where he is not supposed to. Marpa was sitting with his eyes closed, so he sneaked in and sat with other students hoping to be initiated. So Marpa was sitting with eyes closed. He picked up his staff, walked with eyes closed and thrashed Milarepa. He was sitting among the crowd. He came and really thrashed him and physically took him out and threw him out of the place. This happened again and again. He gave certain space and again when another initiation is happening, he sneaked in hoping this time he will get it. More than 13 years passed, he didn't get anything. Then one day he pleaded with Marpa's wife, who was taking sympathy with him, who was like his mother, and he begged her, please tell him to give me something. Just one teaching, one little meditation. I know nothing, I'm sitting here for so many years. So she used her good offices with her husband. Then okay, Marpa said, first let him build a house for my son. Single-handedly, he must build a house. I want a three-cornered house. So he built a three-cornered house, it took 2 years. Then he looked at it and said, three-cornered house is not suitable for my son, build a four-cornered house. He built a four-cornered house. Then he said, that's not good, build a five-cornered house. Like this years passed. He worked single-handedly, building these buildings all over the place. Then he said, that is okay, but I need a 60-foot high tower for my son's house. So he built 60-foot high towers, 4 towers at 4 corners of the house. By then he was aging. Then one day he went and crawled at the mother's feet and asked, please do something, my life is passing away. I have not even been given a single teaching. What is this? I know I have done horrible things in the past, I have misused occult and things, but haven't I done enough? So taking little compassion out of place, she took Marpa's letterhead and wrote a letter to another monk who was also empowered to initiate, as if it is Marpa's letter with the necessary seal and everything. So it gave to Milarepa and Milarepa went to that monk and got initiated. But then nothing happened. Then that monk was shocked. When I initiate something should happen, nothing is happening, what to do? Then Marpa came to know and he called him and got the monk also decertified. Then in utmost remorse, Milarepa was about to commit suicide. Then Marpa called him and then he said, okay, sit down. And he gave him teaching. He said, for what you have committed in the past, I was just giving you methods to work it out, but you are taking your time unnecessarily. If you just go by my word, this would have been over long ago. But you do everything and you take one sneaky way out. Because of that one sneaky way, you're postponing everything for many years. Now your remorse is truly touching the very core of your being. You're willing to die for it. Now you're ready, and he initiated him. And on the very third day, Milarepa had a vision of Dakini. You heard of Dakini? In the tantric technology of doing things, for every chakra they created one goddess, a female form which has been consecrated and made alive, which can be called forth to do things. Nobody does anything significant without the help of these forces. So Dakini came in his vision and she said, Marpa has given you teaching, but without one fundamental aspect, which he himself does not know. You seek it from him. Ask him if he knows. Then Milarepa went to where Marpa was. Marpa looked at him and said, "Why are you here?" Then he said, "Dakini came and said this. I don't know whether this is for real or this is my imagination, but this is what happened, so I had to come and ask you." Marpa bowed down to Milarepa and said, "Even I don't have the teaching, so let's go back to India." Both of them traveled back to India, to Marpa's guru, who was somewhere in the border of Nepal and Bihar. So they walked all the way, they went there, and when Marpa said this to the guru, that like this Dakini came and said that this particular teaching has not happened, the guru looked at him and said, "This is not yours. This could not have happened to you. How did you get this?" Then Marpa said, "This is not me, this is one of my disciples." Then the guru turned towards Tibet and bowed down. He said, "At last in the dark north, one little light has happened." So he called Milarepa and Marpa and gave the whole teaching as to how to attain to one's fullest enlightenment in this life. And they came back, and Marpa, who started as a guru, became like a disciple to Milarepa. Milarepa became a shining light in the Tibetan culture. A lot of things that have been done in the last 300–400 years in the Tibetan culture essentially is from the basis that Milarepa set up.